Ryan, he whispered. His horror-filled eyes frantically searched around for her, and finally when his gaze landed on a lifeless figure lying at a distance from the car, an agonizing scream erupted out of him. Without caring about the fire around him, he bolted in her direction. The shards of metal and glass that were flying as an after-effect of pierced Jungkook, but he couldn't care less. Jungkook struggled to keep the ground steady under his feet as his legs were giving up, yet he stumbled towards her motionless body and dropped on his knees beside her. His heart sank and hands trembled as he turned her over and gently placed her head on his lap. Perhaps it was the first time someone had treated her so gently. In no time, Jungkook's lap was soaked with her. Her face was pale and her eyes were closed as if she was sleeping calmly. Perhaps it was the most calm Jungkook had seen her. He ripped off his jacket and tied it around her head to stem the "I'm not worth the price, Ryan, then why?" Tears left his pain-struck eyes as he questioned her in a broken tone. He hugged her body as if his life depended on her warmth, which was fading with each passing second. Jungkook was losing his control, his sanity over the situation, and was behaving like a psycho straight out of mental asylum. Few of his men were running to comply to his orders, and few were standing in front of him in lines listening to his next orders to capture whoever was behind this incident. His eyes darted towards the operation room door from which a nurse came out, and his men let out a breath of relief as they knew no matter how Jungkook and Ryan fight with each other, somehow Jungkook always stay in his limits and get back on track because of Ryan. Jungkook stormed into the operation theatre, where doctors were still examining her. Doctors were about to stop him, but by looking at his blazing eyes with anger, in his hand, and veins popping out of his neck, no one dared to come in his way. He spotted the head doctor, a middle-aged man with a worn-out expression, standing beside Ryan's bed. "Tell me she's going to be okay," he demanded, his voice low and menacing. Hesitated. "I'm afraid it's not looking good. She has lost a lot and her injuries are severe." His face twisted in a snarl. "I don't care about that. I care about one thing. She needs to be okay, and you are going to make sure of that." Loaded his while maintaining eye contact with a slightly raised eyebrow, a not so subtle form of threat. "Aren't you?" The doctors and nurses who tried to flee the room were stopped by Jungkook's men, and the head doctor, who was facing in the form of Jungkook, took a step back while looking here and there for security. "I'm doing everything I can, but you need to understand the gravity of this situation." The intensity of insanity grew more in his case. "You don't understand the situation. God forbid if something happens to her. I'll burn you and your loved ones along with this hospital of yours. I'll make sure you'll be nothing but a footnote in the history books." His calmly threatening voice dropped to a low whisper. His face paled. "I'm trying my best, sir. You can't threaten me like this. I'm not threatening you. I'm promising you." The operation room fell silent for a moment as the only sound that echoed was the sound of beeping machines surrounding Ryan. Jungkook looked at Ryan and extended his hand to caress her cheek. Her cheek felt surprisingly soft under his rough touch, that he retreated his hand back and stared at her with unknown emotions. "I'll do everything I can." Jungkook shifted his gaze from Ryan towards the doctor, but the warmth he held in his gaze while staring at Ryan was long gone as his eyes met the doctor's scared gaze. "But promise me you won't hurt me or my family." "I promise you nothing. But I'm telling you this, if she dies, you'll wish you had never met me." 2 days later, after 2 days of pure torment, Ryan had finally shown a moment. Doctors were positive that she was finally out of danger and could wake up anytime soon. Jungkook was continuously walking back and forth in her room and watching over her like an alert soldier guarding the border of his beloved country. Soon he felt her moving a little more, and he immediately called the doctor. Finally, Ryan opened her eyes slowly, but as everyone expected her to blink rapidly to adjust to her light-filled surroundings. She just stared blankly at the ceiling, as if there was no light affecting her sight, as if there was no light in her eyes. Jungkook, who was waiting for a reaction with anticipation, frowned and approached her. His eyes scanned her face for any sign of recognition. "Ryan?" He called her out in a hope that she would look at him. Ryan's gaze drifted toward the sound of his voice, but her eyes did not focus on him. Instead, they seemed to stare right through him. Jungkook could not help but lean closer to her and hold her hand. "Ryan, look at me," he ordered her as his grip tightened on her hand. But Vine's eyes did not respond. They remained glassy and unfocused, staring into the void. The doctor stepped forward with a look of concern etched on his face, and his professional tone visibly panicking due to Jungkook's fear. "Let me examine her." Jungkook glared at the doctor as if that doctor had caused the accident. He slowly let go of her hand and stepped back while he never lifted his gaze from her. After the doctor examined her, his expression turned somber before he broke the news to Jungkook. "I'm afraid Miss Vine had suffered significant damage to her optic nerve. She is hesitating. She's blind." Jungkook felt his blood pressure rising as he felt hard to breathe. He looked at Vine expecting her to be hysterical, to be screaming or crying or react in some way. However, Vine just lay there, her face expressionless, her eyes staring blankly into space. Jungkook panic turned into anger as he darted towards the doctor and grabbed him by his collars, knocking the air out of him. "How dare you? Didn't I warn you that nothing should happen to her?" He shouted at the top of his lungs. "Sir, master, please. It's not my fault. Please have some mercy." Without thinking twice, Jungkook jerked the doctor away, making him collide with the wall. Last words, pointed his already loaded at him. "Sir, her blindness could be temporary." Joined his trembling hands in front of Jungkook. The doctor's words stopped Jungkook from pulling the. He tugged the bag in his waistband and pulled the doctor up to make him stand on his feet by grabbing his arms. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" Spoke as if he wasn't about to send him to God just a few seconds ago.